Um, what role do you feel activism plays in pressuring these plans? And what role do you think that it should play?
What role does activism play in pressuring these plans? At the moment, very little. We are pushing at a very closed door. In 2009, though we didn't know it initially, we were pushing at a very open door. We were useful to them. And this is just how the game's the game. This is just how the game is played. You have, in the social movement theory, this concepts of moral entrepreneurs, of opportunities that you rise and fall, and the state is more porous or more closed for various reasons. It might be that there's a politician who's a true believer and tells his bureaucrats, yes, you, or her bureaucrats, yes, you will talk to these people, yes, I want to see action. Alternatively, you get a government full of morons, as we have in this country or in Australia, and access is minimal. There's some very, very interesting, to me, conceptualization around how policy is made, this thing called the multi-level perspective of the landscape, the regime, and the little niches. And Call to Real Action, which you talked about earlier, was a niche that, or a niche organisation that was able to have an impact in the short term. Your problem for activists is that in order to sustain activism, which is physically exhausting, emotionally exhausting, especially when you're dealing with climate change, which no sane individual thinks we have a hope in hell of even minimising the impacts of. People burn out, and organisations, small organisations, will collapse when too many of those individuals burn out. So the answer, such as it is to create structures of paid employees, bureaucrats, etc. But that comes with its own risks, that those bureaucracies are inherently, small c, conservative and unwilling to upset the boat. And also, and I was just watching Noam Chomsky on an old interview of Noam Chomsky talking about how if you are too critical, you lose your access. So you'll have organisations that I won't name because I've already done it so many times, who mistake access and influence. But the reason that they want and need access is partly for personal reasons, to feel like they're making an impact, but also they need to be able to advertise to their financial supporters, who are largely public sector workers or middle class people who sign a direct debit every year. Hey, look, we're trying to change the system from within, we're making a difference. Here's a photo of us talking with such and such a minister. Here's what we managed to do with such and such a bill that has now become law or not become law. The Climate Change Act of 2008 happened largely because of extremely effective lobbying and pressuring by an organisation whose it wouldn't be friendly to say their name. But activists struggle with understanding that dynamic. They struggle to understand that moral outrage in and of itself does not amount to political power. I struggle to understand how elected politicians can allow bureaucrats to just stonewall and lie and kick important issues into the long grass. But I know that it's nothing personal, it's just the game's the game.
Yeah. The next question is up to you if you want to add any more to it, because you've kind of answered it in a different question. From reading your blog, you seem to suggest that there's a lot of secrecy surrounding the creation of plan updates. Would you say this is so, and why do you think it is?
Yeah, my blog does suggest that there's a lot of secrecy around the plans and the updates, and that's because I believe that reflects reality. There's a wonderful quote about, possibly apocryphal, about the Official Secrets Act and the mentality of the British state. And some bureaucrat once was supposed to have been asked, well, what is an official secret? And had replied, if it's in an official file, it's an official secret, which draws it quite broad. The British state is notoriously centralised, notoriously secretive. This is just standard operating procedure. They don't like to share information. They certainly don't like to give ammunition to their perceived enemies. If a plan has been failing, as the as the climate plans have in Manchester, they certainly don't want to offer anyone a stick to beat them with. Again, a normal human reaction, you know. I think that the certain future and the city council's climate plans are so blatantly off track that there was no choice for the bureaucrats and the politicians but to hunker down. And if I had a criticism of myself, or I had many criticisms of myself, one of the many criticisms is we haven't hit them with the Freedom of Information Act enough. The reason I didn't, I just got bored, because I was already digging up loads of scandal and no one seems bothered by the scandals. So the additional scandals that I would get from Freedom of Information Act wouldn't really add anything to the picture. They'd add some detail. Detail's nice, but life's short.
Thanks. Steady State Manchester criticised the lack of acknowledgement that growth is central to increasing emissions. Would you agree with such a statement?
Yeah, so Steady State Manchester has been trying to talk about growth and emissions being tied to each other for a long time, and I was involved in Steady State Manchester, and I wholeheartedly agree that the council wants to dodge this question of the fact that growth and emissions are in not total lockstep, but are strongly linked. They're kind of handcuffed to each other, and you can argue how long the chain is between them, but the two prisoners are chained to each other. And the council will tell you about efficiency savings, and they will never acknowledge Jevons paradox. They will talk to you about carbon fibre wings on airplanes, but never admit that it's going to be 20, 30, 40 years before those come in. And all of this talk around decoupling and emissions from growth and ecological modernisation, these are all fairy stories that people tell themselves because reality is too frightening. We want to believe in our own technological ingenuity. It has done wonderful things for white people, especially European white people, because it was our technology, let's not forget, that enabled us to go to other countries where we were vastly outnumbered and colonise them and live high on the hog. And, you know, technology has been an extremely potent force for white people. I'm not saying that black and Asian people don't have technology or can't use technology. I'm not advocating sort of racist arguments around that. I'm simply saying that for Europeans, the promise of technology is one of the major myths since long before climate and environmental problems came onto the scene. It's a...
Yeah. Weil et al. In 2004 argued that the Global Forum in '94 and such controversies surrounding the airport expansion have led to the City Council insulating themselves from environmentalism. In your experience, would you agree with this, and do you think it's true today?
Did the fuss over the Environmental Forum in 1994 and the airport protests mean that environmentalism was a dirty word in the town hall? Yes. I've been told by several people that there was a long period where the Labour Party regarded anything to do with environment as the preserve of those Guardian reading, lentil eating, sandal wearing, class traitor, sellout hippies, and, you know, kick it into the long grass. It has changed a bit, especially is changing now because you simply have generational change. The protests and controversies are in the history books for most of the councillors. There's very few still around, and even though they'll have told the stories on, it loses its emotional resonance. And also, the only complete morons deny the urgency of climate change, and of the 96 councillors, no more than 94 of them are morons. That was a joke! Of the 90... It made him laugh as well.
It did.
There are very few complete idiots on Manchester City Council, and the ones that are not going to be on forever, and the young uns are getting on with it. So I would argue that that's less of a problem than it used to be. But coming back to the access versus influence question, if you're an organisation that spent many years knocking on the door and being ignored, then when you get into the process, you want to stay there and you don't bite the hand that feeds.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think are the next steps that should be taken with Manchester A Certain Future to meet the imperative of climate change?
I've kind of answered the question about what the next steps are already. I would simply reiterate that if they want to have a shred of legitimacy, they either have to be democratic or they have to be effective. And you know what? They could be both. Will they? Well, time will tell. I mean, I'm not Nostradamus, I'm not Mystic Meg. If I was a betting man, I wouldn't put much money on it.
And finally, any further comments?
I'm exhausted. That's my final comment. I've really enjoyed it.
No, me too, thanks.
It's been an hour, so I think there's a little editing job to be done here. Hi, Mum.
And a lot of typing from me.
Hopefully useful.
Yeah,
Wave at
very
the camera,
useful.
Delilah. Okay. I think all your questions were good. If I can help in any other way, my request to you would be turn your research into something that is not just useful for you in getting your master's, but try and make it useful for people like me and people who don't agree with me, don't like me, don't care, but make it useful for other actors within the policy framework in Manchester and elsewhere. And please come back to me.
I will.
Because I have ways that I think that could be done around videos, cartoons, etc. That is one last thing. We're doing a booklet called Owl and the Pussycat about climate change and local policy making. Me and Marc Roberts and myself. Marc Roberts, the cartoonist.
Okay.
And the cat's called Delilah.
Ah, very nice.
So it's flashing. It's a good stuff. It's a good thing I deleted that much, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't anticipate it being that long, but